Liam McRae woke at 4:47 a.m. like every day for the last 7 years. Not to his alarm clock. He had long ago given up on any electronic device that might give away his location. Not to the sun. In October, in the forests of British Columbia, dawn came much later. He woke to nightmares that came with the punctuality of a Swiss watch. Always at the same time, always with the same images. The basement, the chains, the voice that whispered in the dark, "You're special, Liam." He lay still on the narrow cot, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. The rustle of the wind in the spruce trees, the distant cry of an owl, the crackle of cooling coals in the fireplace. Familiar, safe sounds that told him he was still here in his cabin and not out there in the place that haunted his dreams. Liam sat up slowly in bed, feeling the cold sweat trickle down his back. 34 years old, and he woke up every morning like a frightened child. 7 years had passed since he had escaped the cutter from Vancouver, 7 years of relative peace in this makeshift prison he called home. But the peace was an illusion. He knew that, even if he didn't want to admit it. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain. Beyond the glass was an endless forest, firs and pines stretching to the horizon, where they merged with the gray pre-dawn sky. Beautiful and deserted. This was the kind of isolation he had been looking for when he bought this cabin with the money he had gotten from selling his parents' house. Liam ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble he hadn't shaved in a week. A stranger stared back at him in the mirror above the sink, a thin man with sunken cheeks and eyes that held a permanent wariness. He had once been a mountain climber, his body strong and fit. Now he looked like the hermit he had become. But appearances are deceiving. Liam hasn't become weaker in his years in the forest. He's become different. His muscles have acquired the sinewy strength of a woodcutter. His hands have become rough from constant work, and his eyes have learned to notice the slightest changes in the environment. He's become a predator, masquerading as prey. This thought always bothered him. Who had he become over the years? A survivor or someone else? Liam went downstairs and lit a fire in the fireplace. The ritual of morning coffee helped him focus, to come back to the present. He ground the beans by hand. There was electricity in the cabin, but he preferred to be independent of civilization more than absolutely necessary. While the coffee brewed, he checked the perimeter through the windows. Another habit that had become second nature. Liam studied every tree, every bush, every shadow, looking for signs of someone else's presence. 7 years ago, the doctors had called it paranoia. Now he called it survival. Everything looked normal, too normal. Liam picked up the steaming mug and stepped out onto the porch. The October air was sharp and clean, smelling of pine and approaching winter. He took a sip of coffee and paused. There was a white envelope at the foot of the steps. Liam's heart skipped a beat, then started beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. For 7 years, no one knew where he lived. For 7 years, no one came to his door. Even the postman left the occasional package in a mailbox 3 miles away. He set the mug on the porch railing and walked slowly down the steps. The envelope was plain white with no return address. It had only one word written on it: Liam. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, almost calligraphic. Liam took the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper was high quality, expensive. There was a rustling sound inside, not just a letter. He went back into the house, locking the door behind him with all 3 locks. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope for a long time, not daring to open it. Part of him knew that the contents would change everything, that 7 years of peace were coming to an end. Finally, he tore open the envelope. Inside was a photograph and a short note. The photograph showed a place he would recognize in 1,000, the clearing. in the woods where the police had found him 7 years ago. He had been unconscious, exhausted, his clothes torn but alive. This photo had been taken at a crime scene, but not by the police. The angle was different, more personal. The note was short. "Remember this day, Liam? I remember every second." The world spun around him. Liam grabbed the edge of the table, trying to stay conscious. Memories came flooding back, breaking down the barriers he had spent years building in his mind. A basement. Damp. The smell of mold and something rotting. Chains on wrists, cold and heavy. A voice in the dark, soft and almost gentle. "Are you awake, my special boy?" The Vancouver Carver. That's what the news called him. His real name was David Crawford, 42, a former psychiatrist who had his license revoked for unethical experiments. A serial killer who kept his victims for weeks, studying their reactions to various forms of psychological pressure. "You're not like the others, Liam. The others broke in days. You've been holding on for 3 weeks. What makes you so strong?" Liam stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. His coffee mug fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. He didn't notice. All his attention was focused on the photo and the note. The Carver was dead. Liam had seen the news 3 years ago, killed in a prison brawl, body cremated, case closed, the nightmare over. But the handwriting on the note, something about it was familiar. Not the handwriting itself. It was too neat, too controlled. But something about the way the letters were formed, the slant of the lines. Liam walked to the window and looked out. The forest looked the same as always, but now every shadow seemed suspicious, every sound threatening. Someone knew where he lived. Someone had been watching him long enough to know his routine, his habits. He returned to the table and picked up the photograph again. He examined it more closely. The print quality was professional, the paper glossy. This was not an amateur photo. Someone had spent time and money to make this message as effective as possible. "You are special, Liam. We will meet again." The Carver's last words, spoken as Liam climbed out of the basement. At the time, he had taken them as the empty threat of a broken man. Now they sounded like prophecy. Liam walked into the bedroom and pulled a metal box from under the bed. Inside was a hunting rifle, boxes of ammunition, and a fixed-blade knife. Guns he'd bought to protect against bears, but which were actually intended to protect against more dangerous predators. He checked the gun, making sure it was loaded and ready to use. Then he tucked the knife into his belt and returned to the kitchen. The photograph still lay on the table, accusing and ominous. Liam picked it up and walked to the fireplace. One flick of his wrist and it would have turned to ash, but he couldn't bring himself to throw it in the fire. It was the only proof that his peace had been disturbed. The only clue. Instead, he tucked the photo into a drawer and began to plan. If someone was watching him, they would show up sooner or later. Liam knew the woods better than any outsider. He was the boss here. But deep inside, in a part of his mind he had tried to suppress for years, another thought was growing. Darker, more honest. He had been waiting for this day. 7 years of peace had been his punishment, not his salvation. He had become a ghost, a shadow of himself. Part of him craved confrontation, a chance to feel alive again. Part of him wanted the hunt to start again, and that scared him more than any threat from the outside. Because it meant that the cutter was right. That he really was special. That 3 weeks in the basement had changed him not just as a victim, but as a person. Liam looked at his hands. Strong, calloused, capable of killing. Once they had held ropes and carabiners conquering mountain peaks. Then they had trembled in chains. Now they were ready for war. The only question was who he would fight, his pursuer or himself. Outside, the forest was silent, holding its secrets. But Liam knew the silence was deceptive. The storm was coming, and he could only hope that when it passed, he would still be the man he wanted to be, and not what they made him into in that basement 7 years ago. 3 days had passed since the first message had appeared, and Liam had barely slept a minute. He had turned his cabin into a fortress, boarding up the first-floor windows, leaving only narrow slits for observation. He had strung a thin line at ankle height around the perimeter of the property, a crude but effective alarm. Anyone approaching the house in the dark would be caught on it and dislodge the tin cans tied to the trees. But the worst thing wasn't that someone might come. The worst thing was how easily he fell back into old habits. Liam sat by the second-story window, watching the forest through the scope of his hunting rifle. His fingers automatically checked the safety every few minutes, a gesture he didn't remember learning, but that had become as natural as breathing. When he realized it, a chill ran down his spine. Where did he learn to handle a gun like that? There were no weapons in the Carver's basement. Before the kidnapping, he was a mountain climber, not a soldier. The memories came in fragments like shards of a broken mirror. He remembered the cutter making him do strange exercises, not physical but psychological. Survival games, reaction tests, situations where he had to choose between bad and worse. "I'm preparing you, Liam," the killer would say. "For what?" he'd ask. "For what you'll become." The sound of a snapping line pulled him out of his reverie. Tin cans clanked somewhere in the darkness to the left of the house. Liam instantly tensed, aiming his gun in the direction of the sound. His heart was pounding so loudly he was afraid he would be heard. The minutes dragged on like hours. The forest was silent, but it was an unnatural silence. Even the night birds fell silent, as if sensing the presence of a predator. Liam waited, aiming his gun into the darkness, his finger on the trigger. Then he saw movement. A shadow sliding between the trees, too large to be an animal, too wary to be a casual traveler. Someone was actually there, watching him, studying his reactions. Liam took aim and almost pulled the trigger, but at the last moment he stopped. What if it was just a hiker lost in the woods? What if his paranoia had turned an innocent man into a threat? But tourists don't walk through the forest at 3 in the morning, and they don't move with such caution. The shadow vanished, dissolving into the darkness as suddenly as it had appeared. Liam continued to aim at nothing for another half hour before he realized he was shaking. Not from the cold, but from adrenaline and something else. Anticipation. Part of him was disappointed that he didn't shoot. In the morning, Liam examined the place where the alarm had gone off. In the soft ground, he found a boot print. Large, with a deep tread. Military or hiking boots, expensive judging by the clarity of the pattern. Next to the print was a broken branch, and on the bark of a nearby tree, a fresh scratch. Someone was really here. Someone was watching his house, studying his habits. Liam returned to the cabin and pulled out an old backpack from the closet. It was time to switch from defense to offense. If anyone had been playing cat and mouse with him, let them know that a mouse can be dangerous too. He had packed everything he needed for a multi-day hike. A sleeping bag, canned food, water, a first aid kit, and weapons, a rifle, a knife, even homemade traps made from fishing line and sharp sticks. An arsenal that would have seemed excessive for the average person, but which Liam assembled with professional method. How did he know how to make traps? He certainly wasn't taught that at a mountaineering club. Before leaving, he left several surprises in the house for uninvited guests. Strings stretched across the doorways that would drop tin cans on the head of anyone who entered, and more serious traps in the basement. If someone tried to search his house in his absence, they would get an unpleasant surprise. Liam walked out the back door of the house and disappeared into the woods. 7 years of living here had taught him how to move silently, how to read tracks, how to find cover. He knew every path, every creek, every place to hide or set up an ambush, but the forest seemed different now. Darker, more menacing. Every sound made him flinch, every shadow could hide an enemy. The paranoia he had kept under control for years was unleashed, painting the world in shades of fear. By midday he had reached an old hunting tower about 3 kilometers from home. The abandoned wooden structure rose above the treetops, giving him a clear view of the surrounding area. Liam climbed up and set up with his binoculars, watching his cabin. We didn't have to wait long. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he saw movement near his house. A figure in dark clothing was approaching the building cautiously, moving from tree to tree. Even from a distance, Liam could discern the professionalism in the stranger's movements. This was not a random burglar or a curious tourist. The figure walked around the perimeter of the house, examining the windows and doors. Then it disappeared around the back of the building. Liam knew there was a door there, which he had left unlocked on purpose, a lure for overly curious guests. A few minutes later, he heard the distant clanking of tin cans. The trap had been sprung. Liam smiled, but it was a cold, predatory smile. He had confirmation that he was indeed being followed, and now he knew that his pursuer was not omnipotent, but the joy was short-lived. Because through his binoculars, he saw a figure emerge from the house unharmed, as if the traps were just a minor inconvenience. What's more, the stranger stopped on the porch and waved his hand toward the tower. He knew where Liam was hiding. A chill of dread ran down Liam's spine. Instinctively he ducked, even though he knew he was invisible to the naked eye at this distance. But somehow the stranger knew he was there. Either he had been watching Liam longer than he realized, or he had skills that made him extremely dangerous. The figure stood on the porch for a few more seconds, then disappeared into the woods. Liam waited another hour before he decided to climb down from the tower. Every step back to the house was a test of nerves. He expected an ambush behind every tree, a shot from every bush. But he reached the cabin without incident. The house looked untouched from the outside. But inside, Liam found signs of forced entry. Not a burglary, a careful professional inspection. Things had been moved millimeters. Drawers had been opened and closed so gently that the average person wouldn't notice the difference. There was a new envelope on the kitchen table. Liam took it with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of himself asleep in his bed. It was recent. He recognized the pajamas he'd been wearing for the past few days. Someone had been breaking into his house while he slept and taking pictures of him. The note was shorter than the previous one. "You sleep so beautifully, just like that time in the basement." The world spun around Liam. He grabbed the edge of the table, trying to keep from falling. The memories came flooding back, more vivid and painful than before. Basement. He lies on a dirty mattress, pretending to sleep. The Carver stands over him, whispering something. "My beautiful boy, my special project. Soon you will understand who you really are." Sometimes the killer would bring a camera and take pictures of him. "For science," he explained, "to document the transformation." What transformation? Liam never understood what the cutter was talking about. But now, 7 years later, he was beginning to guess. Liam rushed to the bathroom mirror and peered into his reflection. What did he see? A victim or a predator? A man hiding from the past, or one preparing for war? His eyes were cold, calculating. His hands did not shake despite the shock. He was automatically planning his next steps, how to strengthen the defense, where to set up ambushes, what weapons to use. The thoughts of a killer, not a victim. "I'm preparing you, Liam, for who you will become." Now he understood. The cutter hadn't just been torturing him in that basement. He'd been programming him, turning him from an ordinary man into something else. 3 weeks of psychological experiments, survival tests, forced life-or-death situations. Liam went back into the kitchen and picked up the photo again. This time, he examined it more closely. The angle, the quality of the image, the lighting, everything indicated that this was taken by a professional camera with good optics. Not a phone, not amateur equipment. Someone had spent serious money and time to organize this surveillance. Someone who knew about his past, about his connection to the cutter, about what happened in that basement. But the cutter was dead. Liam had seen the news, read the reports. David Crawford had died in a prison brawl 3 years ago, his body cremated. The case was closed, the files archived. If only. Liam rushed to his laptop, the only electronic device he kept in the house for emergencies. The satellite internet was slow, but it worked. He began searching for information on Carver's death, digging through news archives, police reports, anything he could find in the public domain. What he found made his blood run cold. The official story was simple. David Crawford had been killed in a prison brawl, the body badly bruised, and identification was made from dental records. But the deeper Liam dug, the more inconsistencies he found. The expert who carried out the identification, Dr. Marcus Rhine, committed suicide a month after delivering his conclusion. The official cause was depression due to a divorce. But his suicide note contained a strange phrase: "Some dead people don't stay in their graves." The security guard who first discovered Crawford's body was found dead in his car 2 months later. Officially, a heart attack. But the man was only 35 years old and in excellent physical condition. The prisoner who allegedly killed Crawford was released early for good behavior and disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he was now. Too many coincidences. Too many dead witnesses. Liam sat back in his chair, the terrifying possibility sinking in. What if the cutter wasn't dead? What if he'd faked his death, bribed the right people, eliminated the witnesses? What if he'd been on the loose for the last 3 years, plotting his return? But why wait so long? Why come back now? The answer came suddenly, like a bolt of lightning. The date. Today was October 15th, exactly 7 years since his escape from the basement. 7 years ago, the Carver had said, "We will meet again." Perhaps he had meant not a threat, but a promise. An appointed meeting. Liam closed his laptop and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the forest blood red. Night would soon fall, and with it a new stage of the game. He checked his weapons, reloaded his gun, sharpened his knife. If the cutter was truly alive, if he had come to finish what he had started 7 years ago, then Liam would be fully prepared to meet him. But deep inside, in a part of his mind, he didn't want to acknowledge another feeling was growing. Not fear, but anticipation. He'd been hiding for 7 years, living as a ghost for 7 years. Maybe it was time to remember who he really was. Who did it? The Carver in that basement. Outside the window, the forest was plunging into darkness, and somewhere in that darkness lurked an enemy, or an ally. Liam wasn't sure of the difference anymore. The hunt was on. And this time, he wasn't going to be the hunted. An abandoned sawmill stood deep in the forest like the skeleton of a prehistoric monster. Rusted saw blades jutted from the concrete foundation like teeth in a decaying jaw. The roof had partially collapsed, leaving gaping holes through which moonlight fell onto the moss-covered floor. The place had been dead for 20 years, but tonight it was alive with an eerie energy. Liam approached the building with extreme caution, his gun at the ready. The coordinates he had found in a message from Survivor 7 on the forums had led him here. The meeting was scheduled for midnight, and it was now 11:47 p.m. He walked around the perimeter of the building, studying possible escape routes. Old habits he couldn't remember learning, but which now seemed as natural as breathing. In the moonlight, he noticed fresh tire tracks on the overgrown road. Someone had indeed been here recently. The main entrance to the sawmill was a gaping black hole. Liam turned on his flashlight and stepped inside, his finger on the trigger. The beam of light revealed a strange sight in the darkness. Someone turned an abandoned building into a museum of nightmares. There were photographs on the walls, dozens, maybe hundreds. Liam recognized some of them. They were shots from the Carver's basement, taken by hidden cameras. He saw himself chained to the wall, himself sleeping on a dirty mattress, himself struggling to free himself from the chains. But there were other photographs, other faces, other victims. Men and women of different ages, all with the same expression of terror in their eyes. All in the same basement, chained with the same chains. In the center of the room stood a table, on which lay objects that Liam recognized with painful clarity. The chains that had bound him, the dirty bowl from which he had been fed, even a piece of cloth from his old shirt torn to shreds. Next to the exhibits was a video camera and a note, "Press play if you want to see the truth about your escape." Liam hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him that this was a trap, but his need to know the truth was stronger than his fear. He pressed the play button. The screen showed a high-angle shot of a basement. The date in the corner read 7 years ago. Liam saw himself planning his escape, studying the lock on the chains, secretly loosening the fastenings in the wall, waiting for the right moment. But the camera also showed what he hadn't seen then. In the next room, the cutter sat in front of the monitors, watching his every move. The killer had known about the escape plans from the very beginning. In fact, he had encouraged them, accidentally leaving tools that Liam could use, creating situations that would allow for escape. The escape was a show. The Carver let him escape. Impressive, isn't it? A voice from the darkness made Liam whip around, aiming his gun at the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her 30s, with short dark hair and a scarred face. She was thin to the point of sickliness, but she moved with the caution of a predator. "Who are you?" Liam didn't lower his weapon. "Anna Crawford, the cutter's first victim. I've been officially dead for 8 years. Crawford, same last name as the killer. Are you his relative?" Anna laughed, but the laughter was devoid of any humor. "Daughter, David Crawford was my father, and my first experimental subject." Liam felt the world around him begin to crumble. The cutter was experimenting on his own daughter. "He started with me when I was 14. Anna continued, slowly approaching. "At first it was just games, psychological tests he called them. Then it got worse, much worse." She stopped a few meters away from him, and Liam saw her eyes in the light of the flashlight. They were empty, like a dead person's. He studied how to break the human psyche and put it back together, how to turn prey into predator. I was his first success. "What do you mean?" Anna pointed to the wall where photographs of other victims hung. "I killed them all, on his orders. He turned me into his tool, an extension of his will. And when the police got close, he faked my death and sent me to freedom." Liam felt sick. "But the Carver is dead. I saw the news. My father is indeed dead. Died in prison 3 years ago, as reported. But his work continues." Anna pulled a small device from her pocket that looked like a remote control. "He left. Instructions, detailed plans for each of us." "Each of us? You thought you were the only one who escaped?" "Liam, you were part of the experiment from the start. Just like me. Just like a dozen others." Anna pressed a button on the device and the sound of projectors in action echoed throughout the building. New images appeared on the walls, diagrams, charts, documents. "Project Predator," she explained. "Research into how to turn an ordinary person into a killer. My father wasn't working alone. He had colleagues, sponsors, a whole network of people interested in creating programmable killers. Liam studied the projected documents. Names, dates, detailed psychological profiles. His own file was several pages long. Subject number 7, Liam McRae. Mountain climber, high stress tolerance, prone to isolation. Ideal candidate for the delayed activation program. What does this mean? Liam's voice was hoarse. It means your escape was planned. 7 years of isolation in the woods was part of the program. You weren't hiding, Liam, you were maturing, like wine in a cellar. Anna came closer, and now he could see the madness in her eyes. The messages you received, I sent them. According to the instructions left by my father, it's time for the final phase of the experiment. What final phase? Activation, transformation of you into what you are meant to become. A killer. Liam took a step back, but Anna continued to approach. You feel it, don't you? How easily you've slipped back into the military mindset. How naturally the weapon feels in your hands. 7 years in the woods didn't make you a hermit, Liam. They made you a predator. She was right. And that was what scared him most. For the last few days he had been acting not like a victim, but like a soldier, planning ambushes, preparing traps, thinking about how to kill, not how to escape. What do you want from me? I want you to end the program. There's a list. People who know about Project Predator. Scientists, sponsors, witnesses. They need to be eliminated. Anna took a folder out of her jacket and threw it at Liam's feet. 12 names, 12 targets. Kill them all, and you will be free. What if I refuse? Anna smiled, and that smile was worse than any threat. Then I will activate the others. Subjects 3, 5, and 9. They have already received their assignments. But their targets are not scientists and sponsors. Their targets are innocent people, families, children, random passers-by. Liam felt the trap closing around him. Kill the 12 guilty or let hundreds of innocents be killed. You're bluffing. Shall we check? Anna took out her phone and showed him the screen. On it was a photo of a playground, clearly taken today. In the corner of the frame was a figure of a man with a rifle. Subject number 3 is located 200 meters from an elementary school in Vancouver. One message from me and tomorrow there will be another tragedy on the news. Liam stared at the photograph, horror and rage warring within him. Children. They were threatening children. Why? He whispered. Why all this? Because my father was a genius. He realized that the future belonged not to armies but to individual killers. People with no past, no connections, no conscience. Project Predator was supposed to create a new kind of soldier. Anna walked up to one of the walls and ran her hand over the photograph. But the experiment got out of control. The sponsors got scared when they realized what they had created. They killed my father in prison, thinking that this would stop the project. She turned to Liam, a maddened fire burning in her eyes. But they were wrong. We were already created, and now we will finish what he started. Liam slowly lowered the gun, not in surrender, but because he realized Anna was not an enemy but a victim too. Broken, programmed, turned into a weapon against her will. Anna, he said softly, you don't have to do this. We can stop this. Find other victims. Expose. The project, get help, she shook her head. It's too late for me. I've killed too many people, I've done too many terrible things, but it's not too late for you. Anna pulled a gun from her belt and pointed it at Liam. Choose. 12 guilty or hundreds innocent. Become what you were made to be, or let others suffer for your weakness. Liam stared down the barrel of the gun, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the children in the photograph, about the other victims of the project, about how his choice would determine the fate of many people. There is a third option, he finally said. Which? Liam jerked to the side, raising his gun at the same time. Anna fired, but the bullet missed. He rolled behind an old machine and fired back, aiming not at her, but at the device in her hand. The pellets blew the remote control into pieces. Anna screamed in rage and pain as several pellets hit her hand. "You won't be able to activate the others now," Liam said, rising from his hiding place. Anna looked at the remains of the device with the expression of a lost child. "You don't understand. It wasn't the only device. There are backup systems, automatic triggers. If I don't send an abort signal within an hour, then we have an hour to find a solution." Liam walked up to her and carefully took the gun. Anna didn't resist. She looked at her bloody hands with a detached look. "You don't know what they did to me," she whispered. "What buttons they pushed. In my brain. I can't stop, Liam, even if I want to." "You can. You already stopped when you told me the truth." Liam took a first aid kit out of his backpack and began to treat her wounds. Anna looked at him in surprise. "Why are you helping me? I am your enemy." "No, you're a victim just like me. The only difference is that you were broken earlier." He finished the bandage and sat down next to her on the floor. "Tell me about backup systems. How to stop them." Anna was silent for a long time, struggling with the programming embedded in her mind. Finally, she spoke. "There is a main server in the basement of the house where they kept us. If it is destroyed, all automatic systems will shut down." "Where is this house?" "An hour's drive from here. But there are guards, traps, and..." She paused. "My father could be there. You said he was dead. I said he died in prison. But what if that was a setup too? What if he was hiding in that house all this time, directing the experiment?" Liam felt a chill run down his spine. The possibility that the cutter was still alive, waiting for them in that house, was terrifying. But they had no choice. "Let's go," he said, helping Anna to her feet. "You'll show us the way." They walked out of the sawmill into the pre-dawn darkness. Anna climbed into the passenger seat of his Jeep, holding her bandaged arm. Liam started the engine and pulled out onto the overgrown road. "Liam," Anna said as they drove through the woods, "whatever we find in that house, remember, I'm already dead. I died 8 years ago, the day my father first locked me in the basement. What's sitting next to you is just a shell, programmed to kill. Don't say that. It's true. And when we get home, when we see him, I can go back to being who he made me. Promise me you'll stop me if that happens." Liam's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I promise." But deep down, he knew he couldn't kill her, even if she tried. To kill him. Because in Anna, he saw a reflection of what he could become. And that reflection was worth saving, not destroying. The house emerged from the morning mist like a ghost from the past. A 2-story Victorian surrounded by a high fence and a dead garden. The windows were boarded up, but a faint light was shining from under one of them. Someone was home. Liam parked the Jeep half a kilometer away from the house and took out his gun. Anna sat motionless, looking at the building with an expression of horror and longing. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "I can't go back to that place." "Then wait here. I will find the server and destroy it." "No." Anna shook her head and got out of the car. "This is my nightmare. I have to end it." They approached the house from different directions. Liam found an unlocked basement window and carefully stepped inside. The smell hit him like a physical blow, a mixture of mold, chemicals, and something rotting. The basement was just as he remembered it. Chains on the walls, dirty mattresses on the floor, surveillance cameras in the corners. But there was something new here now, too. Rows of servers blinking red and green in the darkness, and a chair in the center of the room in which a familiar figure sat. David Crawford, the Vancouver Carver, was alive. Older, grayer, but definitely alive. He sat in front of the monitors, watching something on the screens. "Welcome home, Liam," he said without turning around. "I've been waiting for you." Liam pointed the gun at the killer but didn't fire. Something was wrong. The cutter was sitting too still, too calm. "You're dead," Liam said. "I saw the news." Death is a relative concept. The carver finally turned around, and Liam saw his face. Half were normal, human. The other half were mutilated beyond recognition. Melted skin, exposed bone, and empty eye socket. The prison fight was real. I was really maimed. But I survived. I faked my death and came back here to finish the job. The carver rose from his chair, and Liam saw that he was moving with difficulty, leaning on a cane. "I've been watching you for 7 years, Liam, waiting for you to mature for 7 years, and now you're here. I came to stop you." "Stop me?" The carver laughed. "My boy, you have come to finish what we started. You have come to become what I made you to be." He pointed at the monitors, and Liam saw images from security cameras all over the city. Schools, hospitals, shopping malls. Each frame showed a figure with a gun, other victims of the project, waiting for the signal to attack. "One word from me and the massacre will begin. Hundreds of innocent people will die, unless you do as I ask." "What do you want?" The carver walked up to the wall and pressed a button. Part of the wall slid aside, revealing another room. There were 12 chairs in it, each with a person sitting in them. Men and women of various ages, all unconscious, hooked up to some kind of machines. "The project's sponsors," Cutter explained. "The people who financed my research and then tried to betray me. I want you to kill them all with your own hands." Liam looked at the helpless people, feeling disgust. They are unconscious, defenseless. This is not murder. This is an execution. Exactly. A clean, efficient execution. No emotion, no regrets. That's how the perfect killer works. The carver handed him a knife. "Take it. Do what I created you to do." Liam stared at the knife, feeling 2 people fighting inside him. The one he was before the basement, a climber, an ordinary man with a conscience and morals, and the one they made him into, a predator willing to kill to survive. "What if I refuse? Then hundreds of innocents will die. The children, Liam. Think of the children." At that moment, Anna entered the room. She moved like a zombie. Her eyes were empty and lifeless. "Anna," the carver smiled. "My dear daughter, you brought him to me as I asked." I didn't want to," Anna whispered. "I tried to resist. Of course I tried. But programming is stronger than will. You can't disobey me, dear. None of you can." The carver turned to Liam. "See, even she couldn't resist her nature. What makes you think you can?" Liam looked at Anna, at the helpless people in the chairs, at the monitors with potential victims. The choice was impossible. Kill the 12 guilty or let hundreds of innocents die. But then he remembered Anna's words. "There are backup systems, automatic triggers." "You're bluffing," he told the cutter. "You have no control over others." Anna said there are automatic systems. The carver's face changed. "Smart boy. Yes, the systems are automatic, but I can turn them off if you do what I ask." "What if I don't?" "Then The cutter looked at his watch. 20 minutes, the massacre will begin, and you will know that you could have prevented it." Liam slowly picked up the knife. The metal was cold and heavy in his hand. He walked over to the first chair where an older woman sat. In her sleep, she looked peaceful, harmless. "Do it," the carver whispered. "Become who you were meant to be." Liam raised the knife, aiming it at the woman's throat. His hand was shaking. 2 voices were fighting inside him, one demanding that he kill to save the innocent, the other screaming that it was wrong. At the last moment he turned and threw the knife at the carver. The blade entered the killer's chest up to the hilt. The Carver looked at the knife in surprise, then at Liam. You chose their death. I chose freedom, Liam replied. The Carver fell to his knees, blood flowing from his mouth. You don't understand. Systems, automatic, can't be stopped. He died without finishing his sentence. Anna stood motionless, looking at her father's body. Then she walked over to the servers and began to turn them off. Help me, she said to Liam. We need to destroy all the data. They worked feverishly, shutting down servers, destroying hard drives, erasing all traces of Project Predator. Liam didn't know if it would stop the automated systems, but it was the only chance. When they finished, Anna sat on the floor next to her father's body. What now? She asked. Now we leave. Find other victims of the project. Help them. Tell the world the truth. Anna shook her head. I can't. I've killed too many people. I've done too many terrible things. She picked up the gun from the floor and put it to her temple. It's the only way to stop what's inside me. No! Liam rushed towards her, but it was too late. The shot rang out in the silence of the basement. Liam sat next to Anna's body, holding her dead hand in his. She looked peaceful, as if she had finally found the peace she had been searching for her whole life. He stood up and walked out of the house. Dawn was turning the sky pink. Somewhere in the city, other victims of the project were waiting for a signal that might never come. Liam hoped that destroying the servers had stopped the automated systems, but he couldn't be sure. He got into the Jeep and drove away from the House of Nightmares. The radio was broadcasting the morning news, the usual reports on politics, sports, weather. No reports of mass shootings. Maybe they managed to stop the massacre. Maybe. Liam returned to his cabin in the woods, but he knew he couldn't live there anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts. He packed the bare essentials and got back in the car. There was uncertainty ahead. Perhaps he would be persecuted for what he knew about the project. Perhaps other victims would try to find him. Perhaps there was another Carver out there continuing the experiments. But Liam knew one thing for sure. He was no longer a victim, nor was he a killer. He was a survivor who had made a choice and was willing to live with the consequences. He drove along a forest road, leaving behind 7 years of isolation and fear. Ahead was a world full of dangers and opportunities, a world in which he had to find his place. Not as a victim, not as a predator, just as a human. In his jacket pocket was a list, the names of the other Project Predator victims he had found in Carver's files. 12 people scattered across the country who did not know the truth about what had been done to them. Liam was going to find them all, tell them the truth, help them break free from their programming. This was his new mission, his way of atoning for failing to save Anna. He rode towards the rising sun, and for the first time in 7 years, he was not afraid of what lay ahead. The hunt is over. The rescue has begun.